What if truth in cinema isn't spoken at all, but flickers in the frames they trimmed away? A projector coughs, the image jumps, and a jungle becomes a border that never agreed to exist. A soldier steps forward, oath on his lips, doubt in his shadow. Late Cold War action promised clean banners, righteous missions, endings that saluted on cue, yet some reels slipped. Under the thunder, a smaller sound persisted, the friction of politics against conscience. Propaganda rehearsing itself as destiny. Heroes discovering that certainty melts under heat. Call them pulp if you must. Labels only soften the confession. Look closely, and you will see 5 stories that said too much by pretending to say very little. These are the 5 films that revealed what Hollywood tried to hide. By the end of the 1,980 seconds, the battlefield had migrated to the movie screen. The Cold War was collapsing in headlines but thriving in cinema reels. Studios, some American, some foreign, kept staging conflicts long after treaties were signed, selling heroism to an audience still addicted to war's illusion. These weren't just action films. They were mirrors of a fractured conscience. Each bullet fired on screen disguised a question the public wasn't ready to face. What if our victories were built on edited truths? What if the enemies we chased were projections of fear, drawn by a camera that couldn't look away? Between the explosions and the flag waving, a quieter narrative flickered the story of soldiers who became symbols, and symbols that began to doubt their own purpose. These films were sold as entertainment, but their silence was political. Each cut, each reshoot, each erased credit whispered of the pressure to conform. They were not blockbusters. Yet they carried the weight of confession stories that spoke about power, loyalty, and manipulation through the language of action. Let's rewind to the 5 films that crossed the line between entertainment and confession. Film 1, Avenging Force, 1986. The film opens with a promise of justice but ends with a warning about power. Set against the mist and murk of the Louisiana Bayou, Avenging Force begins like a standard revenge thriller. A decorated agent returns home, a political assassination unfolds, and a masked society hunts men for sport. Yet beneath the surface of heroics lies something darker, a parable about privilege disguised as patriotism. Director Sam Furstenberg shoots the action like ritual. Men in camouflage become hunters, their victims trophies in a game sanctioned by ideology. Michael Dudikoff's hero is the perfect soldier, obedient, moral, lethal. But as the film unspools, the righteousness he embodies corrodes. The Pentangle, a secret fraternity of power, worships purity and violence in equal measure. Their masks hide not faces, but systems, the kind that survive elections and rewrite morality. When the hero finally confronts his hunters, victory feels hollow. The swamp still breathes, and the masks remain. Avenging Force was marketed as a B-action spectacle, yet it plays like a confession. America's myth of justice feeding on its own reflection. It was too grim to celebrate, too honest to succeed, and so it was forgotten. Film 2, The Ultimate Mission, 1988. It was supposed to be just another Cold War thriller, a Western agent sent behind enemy lines. But Tenzan, The Ultimate Mission, became something stranger. A film that couldn't decide whose story it was allowed to tell. Shot in North Korea and Italy under tense political cooperation, it stands as one of cinema's rarest anomalies, a Western-made film produced with the approval of an Eastern regime. On the surface, it's a mission movie. Frank Zagarino as the stoic operative, sent to uncover a biochemical conspiracy. The trailers promised explosions, soldiers, and moral clarity, yet inside its frame lies an uncomfortable dance between propaganda and exposure. The North Korean sets, the rigid parades, the synchronized workers, they're presented as backdrop, but the camera can't help admiring the choreography. Every shot becomes a quiet negotiation between truth and diplomacy. The editing hides more than it shows. The dialogue stumbles under the weight of translation and censorship. What was meant to glorify action begins to reveal obedience. In the film's final act, the hero survives, But the story doesn't, it collapses under contradiction. Tenzan was quickly buried in obscurity, too awkward to promote, too revealing to erase. In the end, the ultimate mission wasn't the one on screen. It was the struggle to tell a story without betraying who it was really for. Film dry. Phantom Soldiers 1987. The title promised a simple war fantasy, faceless enemies, fearless heroes, and redemption through violence. But Phantom Soldiers, filmed in the Philippines under American-Filipino co-production, became a ghost story about something far deeper. How a war that never truly ended keeps resurrecting itself on screen. At first, it feels familiar. A rogue squad is sent on a rescue mission, surrounded by jungles that seem to breathe with unseen eyes. The gunfire crackles like memory mechanical, rehearsed, strangely hollow. Yet the longer you watch, the more unreal it becomes. The soldiers march through smoke that looks recycled, through villages that appear built for the sole purpose of being destroyed again. It's not a battle. It's a reenactment, a loop designed to keep the myth alive. Director Teddy Page's camera lingers on faces between fights, young men staring into nothing, as if waiting for permission to wake up. Their mission blurs, their purpose dissolves. The phantoms aren't supernatural, they're reflections of the soldiers America left behind, the ones still fighting wars that ended years ago. By the time the credits roll, victory feels irrelevant. The jungle remains, the ghosts stay. Phantom Soldiers isn't about survival, it's about repetition. The endless performance of war for those who can't stop pretending it has meaning. Film 4. Bulletproof 1988. At first glance, Bulletproof looks like another late, 80 seconds adrenaline product tanks, desert landscapes, and Gary Busey trading one-liners against the wind. Yet behind its explosions lies a story about control, technology, and denial, a film trying to reassure its audience that America's power could still be mechanized, contained, and sold. The setup is textbook: a stolen prototype tank, an out-of-control mercenary, and a lone soldier tasked with bringing order back to chaos. But the longer it plays, the clearer its anxiety becomes. The superweapon isn't protection. It's obsession, a symbol of how violence became the only language left to describe safety. Every metallic echo, every dust-filled chase scene, feels like an argument between progress and paranoia. Director Steve Carver keeps the pace furious, but the subtext flickers beneath the speed. Soldiers turned into salesmen, warfare reduced to market value, and technology promising security while multiplying fear. The tank may be indestructible, but the men inside it aren't. Their loyalty is traded as quickly as their ammunition. When the final explosion fades, what remains isn't triumph, but fatigue, the silence of a machine that outlived its purpose. Bulletproof tried to prove America still had the edge. Instead, it showed a country armoring itself against doubt. Film 5. Red Scorpion 1988. Every empire dreams of its perfect soldier, one who obeys without asking why. Red Scorpion opens with that dream in uniform. Dolph Lundgren's towering Soviet operative is sent to silence rebellion in an unnamed African land. The mission is clear, the rhetoric rehearsed, but somewhere between the orders and the desert wind, the certainty fractures. On the surface, it's a conversion narrative, a villain who becomes the hero, an instrument of control who learns freedom through empathy. Yet the truth behind the camera is far murkier. Produced with support from South Africa's apartheid-era government, the film was built on contradiction. A movie about liberation financed by oppression. Every frame becomes an argument with itself, sunlight falling on uniforms stitched from hypocrisy. As the protagonist's faith unravels, so does the illusion of purity. His defection feels less like triumph and more like confession, the machinery of ideology grinding to a halt. The final explosion, meant to symbolize redemption, leaves behind only smoke and sand, as if the film itself were uncertain what victory should look like. Red Scorpion was banned, edited, and condemned across continents. But its chaos revealed a truth larger than politics, that no system can fully choreograph human conscience. When the uniform falls away, what remains is the fragile, dangerous clarity of choice. Some films never get the chance to fail because someone decides failure would be too revealing. During the Cold War's cinematic twilight, countless projects vanished mid-production, their reels seized, their scripts rewritten, their truths postponed. One such ghost was American Commandos 2, a sequel planned in the Philippines after the first film's accidental cult success. It promised to expose the moral rot inside covert operations using the same actors who once glorified them, but funding evaporated when investors realized the script was too critical, and its rough footage was locked away, later rumored destroyed. Stories like this weren't rare, they were systemic. Governments, studios, and distributors shared an unspoken alliance, protect the myth of control, erase the evidence of doubt. A shelved film meant stability, a cut scene meant silence restored. The audience would never know what they missed. The reel would simply stop where comfort began. These buried works form the negative image of cinematic history. What we don't see defines what we believe. Their absence is itself a message. That art is never neutral, and sometimes the truth costs more than release rights. Some films fail on screen, others were never even allowed to fail. When the smoke clears and the reels slow to a stop, what remains isn't the spectacle, it's the silence that follows. These 5 films were never meant to change the world. They were meant to distract it. Yet in trying so hard to entertain, they revealed the machinery behind illusion. Soldiers repeating myths, cameras rewriting morality, and nations exporting certainty to hide their own confusion. Each frame, each explosion, each heroic pose carried a fracture, a small tremor of honesty beneath the choreography of control. That's the paradox of cinema in the Cold War's dying light. The more it tried to reassure, the more it confessed. In those accidental admissions, we glimpse something raw and human: doubt, disguised as drama, guilt edited into motion. The truth, it turns out, doesn't need dialogue. It lives in the pause between cuts, in the flicker where real and real collide. Because the camera can lie, but the film stock always remembers what it saw. Which of these films spoke loudest to you, the confession beneath the gunfire, or the silence that followed it? Every story we watch is also a mirror of what we're willing to ignore. Maybe that's why these films were buried, because they showed too much of the world outside the frame. Tell us, which truth do you think Hollywood still hides today? Leave your thoughts below. Share this story with someone who still believes action is just entertainment, and subscribe for the next descent into cinema's forgotten vaults. Real Secrets, where the truth was always in the edit.